Okay, for milestone 4, um, some of the things that I had to do, uh, range input for a ranged weapon, setting that up, uh, doing the HUD for the items collected, basic layout, locking aspect to portrait, um, basically setting up the HUD, which I've already done, and doing the lerping. So really, most of the stuff that I had was doing more work on the boss, and doing the range. So here, the ranged attack, what I needed to do was to set up to use the panning and to create the box 2D body, do the animation for it, the texture, set the velocity, and then be able to destroy it. So let me show in the code what that looks like. So in the entity manager, with the way that I've kind of reset it up, I have just two frames that kind of flip back and forth for giving the arrow that it kind of has movement. So those are created, and I can show that. But when I create the arrow, and yes, let me make this a little bit bigger. When I create the arrow, I have to have an animation component for it, interactive, because it has just basically kind of a generic interactive type, and then the interactive component is how I can set that it is an arrow so that I can check for colliding. Renderable, so that I can render to the screen. I assign the texture, and then the generic type, the X and Y, the body, and the data. So going through to adding the animation, this is the animations for the arrow, so I can set those. It doesn't really have a state. The texture component, oh, that might, okay. For the arrow, I'm assigning the component based off the state that the player is facing, and then data, so that I can choose to have it. If it hasn't destroyed, it will destroy when I switch screens, but it's most definitely destroyed before then. And then I add the position, the type, the collision, and okay. The arrow, I'm applying an impulse to it, and it, for a box 2D body, it's treated as a bullet, so that it's not really, when it's doing the checks, it's supposed to be much more efficient when it's passing through things. So for the arrow, I'm giving it just kind of an impulse of 5, and then I have to check the states of my player for which direction I'm going to apply the force to, whether it's going to be in the X or Y, positive or negative, and then assigning that. That's pretty much it. And then I set it for the interactive component, that it's type arrow. So then in my collisions system, then all it's really doing is when I'm colliding, when a weapon is colliding, because that's what gets created. When the weapon is colliding, it's going to check. So for, like, say, the enemy, it's checking what interactive type it is. So for the arrow, I'm having it where I'm decreasing health from the enemy, but not as much. but I'm decreasing more aggression from the enemy. And then in my controlled movement system, that's where it's created. So once I'm doing this, and this is a pan, so I click and then swipe to create the entity, which is my arrow, and it's going to create it as a weapon type. And then right now I just have it doing the player attack sword, and then after 0.6 seconds it's just going to delete it. So by that time it's off the screen, so it's just setting it to destroy. The issue that I'm having right now is that it's creating multiple of them, so I'm probably going to have to put a timer or something on it so that I can only fire one at a time. Was not able to do it yet, but I can show that it's getting collected. So when I play it, you should see that when I collect the bow, that will show up in my weapon UI as being collected, and only then can I swipe and be able to do the attack. So there it is right there. So there is a couple of issues because it's not doing it. Since my player rotates, my texture stays stagnant, but my box 2D body is rotating. I need to fix the origin from where it's shooting, and you've seen that it was shooting it multiple times. What I also need to do is, because I can swipe right now any direction, will get me into doing the case of doing the range attack, but not making my player face the correct direction. So I could swipe to the left, and if I was facing to the right, I would still shoot to the right. So that's, I have to also turn my player, so I'm going to have to do that. But that's basically the range. So you've seen that it could push the enemy. All right.